Adlerblick, der Podcast, der hilft, die Zukunft zu verstehen und die Gegenwart zu gestalten. Adler fliegen hoch und blicken weit. Mein Name ist Steffen Ehl. In this podcast, I speak with Christian leaders, usually in German. However, we have today a special guest from the US with Yvonne Carlson. Yvonne is Chief Technology Officer at Global Media Outreach, board member at FaithTech, speaker at various conferences like Mission AI, and she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And Yvonne, I heard that you speak also a little German.
Yes, and Dutch as well. My mother is from the Netherlands, and so she comes from a town that is close to the border. So, of course, speaking German and Dutch was a regular thing in our home.
The name of the show here is Adlerblick. Is this understandable for you?
Yes.
So, Eagle's view, long-term view, what's going on. And so that's what we also want to discuss a bit, the Eagle's view, the big picture on where the trends are, what's going on. But starting with you, first of all, in person, Yvonne, I saw in your CV on LinkedIn that you started in secular business, first of all, and then moved into Christian ministry. How come?
Well, I think that God gives us experiences and shapes us for the future. So I spent several years in secular business world in global settings, and I gained valuable experience in technology and leadership. But I felt a strong calling to use those skills for a higher purpose. I always had a heart for missions. I didn't realize that missions could look like what I'm doing now at Global Media Outreach. And so I had an opportunity to combine my desire to see people know the Lord and my technical expertise. And that's why I'm here today.
Yeah. And is it different to work in a ministry setting than a secular setting?
Absolutely. I think it's actually easier to work in a secular setting because I think it's very clearly defined. You're working on very specific outcomes. But when you're in ministry, you're dealing with people. So you have to think deeper. You have to look at how people feel. It's not about a bottom line, the revenue line, right? It's much more than that. So you have to treat people in a holistic way, mind, body, and soul. So that takes more work. It takes prayer. It takes preparation. You have to really be intentional. I feel like in the secular world, I got the revenue report every day, and I knew what product lines were doing well or which product lines needed some work. And it was, and that it was a matter of, coming up with plans to improve those products or get that bottom line, moving in the direction we want. It's just different.
Interesting. So Global Media Outreach, what is Global Media Outreach doing? Can you give us a short summary for people who never heard of it?
Sure. So if you go to globalmediaoutreach.com, what you'll find is a map. And on that map, you'll see different pin points popping up. And why you're seeing that is somebody has responded to a digital ad. And this is a gospel presentation. And you're seeing indicated decisions on that map where people have accepted the Lord, or you're seeing where people might have asked for discipleship resources. So it's some sort of engagement or connection with the ministry, but you're seeing that in real time. So you know where in the world that person is located. So it's really using digital advertising and web properties to be to do online missions.
So people who search on Google or wherever on search engines, they get advertisement from you.
We advertise in different platforms, so Facebook, Google, etc., YouTube. So we're in multiple platforms and in 13 languages, and so we target our ads actually to people who don't know the Lord, that don't have any context for Christianity. Our hope is to reach the people who've been under.
So what's a typical phrase or search search phrase someone is looking for who gets then an ad from you? I guess if I look for cars, I won't run into GMO. Where does it connect?
So if you're thinking like if you go into Google and you search and you get a search ad, we're not generally there. We're usually delivering ads through platforms. So those platforms give us a lot of data, so we understand how to tailor our message to that audience. And again, we're looking for people who specifically are not familiar with Christianity. If you want to see examples of our ads, though, you can go to our globalmediaoutreach.com. It actually walks you through the process that we follow, in terms of the user experience. And it gives examples of different brands that you might see our advertising in.
And you said it's in 13 different languages. I guess the majority is English, because English is the largest language.
Actually, we get more response. We get equal response from outside the U.S. I mean, there's definitely the global piece of what we do. In terms of the top 3 languages where we get response, that it is English, right? But that's not necessarily people just from the U.S. It could be around the world. And then Spanish and Arabic or other, languages where we see a lot of engagement.
And then I understood that it doesn't end with the ad, but it directs to a discipleship course.
Well, it's even more than that. It's not just content. You can actually interact with an online missionary. So you can connect with the person and start a discipleship journey. This is somebody that will be talking with you long term, answering any questions, and then they will provide you resources. But it's more also that, that coaching and that mentoring and help people to understand, what is it like to be a Christian? If I say yes to being a Christian, what does that mean? So it's beyond just saying, people raising their hand and praying, the sinner's prayer. We want to make sure that they understand the decision and that they can get plugged in so they can grow in that faith.
Okay. And they get connected to real people, or is it?
Correct. Right. Those online missionaries are all over the world. And so we have a proprietary system where the seeker, the person who saw the ad, is connecting with that missionary. And not only can they speak to that real person at that moment, right, after they see the ad, but that same person is available to chat with them on an ongoing basis. So a lot of the missionaries have contacts that they've been interacting with, some of them for years.
Wow.
So there's real relationship there.
Yeah. So that means GMO is a platform connecting seekers with believers, yeah? Is that fair
online
to say?
Missionaries, right? Yeah, believers who want to serve as online missionaries, they go through training.
Yeah.
And through our discipleship course information, they have all of those resources. Those are made available to them. So it's really neat because we are recruiting for online missionaries. So if people are interested in serving, all they have to do is go to our website and fill out a simple application.
Okay. Yeah, then it would be a good time to bring also German and Dutch in, yeah? In the portfolio.
Oh, I would love that. Oh, yes. I mean, we are always looking for partners, for expansion opportunities. So people will, connect with us, and, we work through the possibility to see if that might be a good fit for partnership. And so some of our language teams are really our partnerships with other organizations.
Yeah, okay. So in an earlier episode, I spoke with a Creedle, an organization with a similar approach, starting from Germany, focused first of all on Germany and then growing. So that would be an option also to partner in there. Yeah? Do I understand that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, wow, that's a good opportunity. Speaking about the big picture of the international, also different cultures in the world. You have a European heritage a generation ago, at least, but contacts and family here live in the US. What is your perspective on how is it faith in Europe and the US?
Well, so my mother is a citizen of the Netherlands, so I've spent a lot of time there. And then I grew up here, but I very much grew up in the Dutch way. You understand what I mean? In terms of ideology and how I see things. And so from a practical standpoint, I think in the United States, we're very blessed to have a church on every corner. And so if you want to have a spiritual conversation, if you want spiritual material, if you want somebody to pray for you, it's easily available. And people can just be really bold and say, can you pray for me? I mean, you can just show up at church and, introduce yourself and people will, embrace you. I think in Europe, it's different. In my experience of the European church, I was invited by someone, right, who attended the church and they introduced me to some of their friends. So a little bit of a different experience. I think the American experience is a little bit more consumer centric. I would say the European experience is really relational. It's like, this is my church, this is my parish, this is part of who I am. So I want to invite you to join that. And actually, I really love that. That's really refreshing.
Yeah, it's at least it's different. Yeah, we see when traveling here and there that also church is different. Yeah, not only culture is different, but it also reflects in churches and how we live as church. Yeah.
Right. I think in America, like I said before, we just have a lot of freedom. There are a lot of, parachurch organizations or organization outside of churches. You'll see, for example, in major corporations like Salesforce, there's Faith Force, right? Or other special interest groups that center around faith, and specifically, the Christian faith. So I think that the opportunities to connect with like-minded Christians, I think, probably are greater.
Yeah, that's also my experience from the time where I worked in Cisco. I was very surprised in the beginning to find an email alias with the employees prayer group, yeah, where they just connect. Would be not thinkable in traditional German companies, at least. Yeah, I haven't heard of this.
I'm sure it exists in some places in Europe, based on what some friends have shared, but I don't think it's common.
No, definitely not common. It's the unusual then, yeah.
Exception.
Yeah, and that's also my perspective that it's a bit different here and there. My impression is that in the US it's much more professional. So there is, in a way, better organized. It is often larger and has some structure in, while here it is, we have a lot of the business is around smaller companies, medium-sized companies, while the US focus very strong on larger ones. And that is a bit similar also in the church life.
Well, I would say, when you go to church in Europe, there are a lot of professionals involved, like, musicians, or they do production, or people who are serving. They don't necessarily work for the church. They're just part of the church. Here, people have pretty sizable staff. The number of staff. Now, note though that the average American church is 80 people, right?
Okay.
So there are people who wear multiple hats and do it all, right? In terms of the pastor. But here you do see those mega churches, right? You see those really large churches where, 5,000 on a Sunday and the staff might be 7,500 people. So they're bringing their professional experience, like production, you're seeing that, you might have professional musicians. So you do see that, infused into the church here, where I think in Europe, it's more a volunteer capacity. In the US, you're going to have some paid staff and volunteers working together.
Yeah, and I think maybe it depends a bit on the free churches with it, it is more voluntarial, while in the state church, the Lutheran church, and the Catholic church, it looks a bit different, yeah, because they
They're following the denomination.
Yeah. That's just different, yeah. Yeah, Yvonne, I read that GMO has high targets for the year 2033, when we celebrate 2,000 years of Jesus' resurrection. Can you share a bit of this big vision?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is our 5-star strategy. And note that GMO is experiencing its 20th anniversary. So we asked ourselves, what does the next, 10 years of ministry look like? And so this is what you would say, that big, audacious goal that when people hear it, they say, oh, I can't believe it. But believe it, we'll do it. We want to reach 5 billion people with the gospel.
5 billion people. That's a big number.
Yes, but if you look at our website, you can see that we've already reached 2.7.
Okay. That brings it a bit in perspective. The 5 billion is a huge number.
Right. So, and then we'd like to see 500 million people make an indicated decision for Christ. And because of the extent and reach of our ads and our network, our partners, this is completely achievable. So, we're working behind the scenes on plans and as to how this will work. I don't know if you looked into the history of our organization, but the founder, Walt Wilson, worked for Steve Jobs. And the decision to create GMO was actually...
So this Steve Jobs.
Yes. So Walt Wilson worked for the Steve Jobs. That's correct. So he came from the Silicon Valley. So that was his background, right? Big tech. And so he was in a meeting at MIT. And he said to himself, okay, and this is before Google advertising, was really a big thing. It was just at the beginning of, doing digital advertising. He's like, I wonder how we can use this technology to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And here we are
this. I like
20
this.
years later. So if you aim low, you'll achieve those results. If you aim high, you'll achieve those results. You have to set your targets in a way that demonstrates faith, right? If the target was manageable and by human means, then I make a plan, I execute the plan, and it's done. But if I'm inspired by God, by the Holy Spirit, and I want to reach people in His name, then I need to think bigger, and I need to think differently. And so we very much have an innovative culture at GMO, which I very, very much appreciate.
Wow. And I like this. I like this concept, and I like this approach. 5 billion is a huge number, and it shows also what technology is capable to do. Yeah?
That's right.
So we can use it for a very good cause, and I love this about GMO. And Yvonne, you are as Chief Technology Officer responsible for technology. Yeah? So innovations. What fascinates you most on AI?
Well, we saw that big goal, or we talked about that big goal of 5 billion with advanced tools, including some AI tools. We can see big growth or huge growth, right? So, what is that force multiplier? What is that lever, if you flip it, will change the outcome? Technology is that lever. So I'm involved with Missional AI, and then they have a community called the AI Collective, and that's a group of practitioners. And we meet on a regular basis, and we talk about ethics, we talk about the tools that we're using, and we learn from each other. Because as believers, we're all on the same team, which is wonderful, right? And I think when we consider what's happening in a retail space, you go to a website and you see a little bubble and you chat with someone, you're talking about your order. Well, we can do that and talk about Jesus. We can answer people's questions, right? We can connect them with a human when they actually want to talk to a human. All of that technology is completely useful here and scalable, right? So when we think about computing power and the costs of these systems is definitely more attractive, affordable. The sky is the limit.
Yeah. And I think especially the scalability is a big game changer. Yeah. So in the past, we were always very dependent, having bottlenecks in different areas on the people side, and especially on the cost side. But here with technology, there comes a possibility to scale up high. Yeah. As you are doing with your high targets there.
Right. And you mentioned like people could be a bottleneck. Well, that's precisely where technology could help. Like you, in that situation where there's a bottleneck, you could have a co-pilot that helps the human know what to do. Oh, the next step should be this. Okay, I'll do that. Oh, I'm going to suggest to you a response, just like what we're seeing in some of the software we use. So that will help the human complete their task more efficiently and effectively so they can do more. But it also can open opportunities. And of course, this could be controversial, and I'm not saying that we're planning on doing this, but more and more I'm seeing, people talking with bots and getting their basic questions answered, and then, talking to human, when needed. So that is scalable, right? That bot is scalable.
Yeah. And I think the acceptance changes over time, yeah? So I was not around when the telephone was invented, but I would think that first of all, people thought, why should I call someone when I can also go to the person and see them in real? But after a couple of years, it got very normal that we use the phone. We use the phone for things like this, yeah? And similar, we could have a handover from a bot to a human at a later stage then.
Correct. At a later stage. Correct. Right. And honestly, when it comes to like frequently asked questions, chances are that bot's going to be more efficient and effective than the human would. Right. Because there's a pattern. Like you know that most people ask these questions. No problem. I can answer those quickly for you. And then you can go deeper into the conversation. That's what I like. Right. It sets you up to have a deeper conversation once you get to the human, because you've already had your basic questions answered.
Yeah. So, Yvonne, what's the biggest challenge for a CTO at Global Media Outreach?
I think for any CTO, it's defining the problem. What problems can technology
defining
solve?
The problem.
Yes, because technology is just a tool, right? So it's saying, when I look at my organization, what are problems that if we solve them, it will have dramatic impact on the outcomes? Or it allows people to be more efficient and effective in their jobs. Or we can use data to measure what matters and understand people's experiences and design better experiences. All of those are opportunities. So it's defining the problem, like, what am I trying to solve? And then stepping back and saying, what are all the possibilities? So I'm a human-centered designer. So I believe in involving the human from the very beginning of any product. So it's like, what problem am I solving? And I'm getting the person who I'm solving it for involved. Because I might have a solution that makes total sense to me. And hey, I'm an engineer. So, of course my logic makes sense to me. That's how we work, right? But maybe the solution I'm envisioning for that user is way off base, or the way I'm presenting it, the interface, the colors, the human factors piece, I'm totally getting wrong. Right? And if you get the packaging wrong, it doesn't matter what's inside of the package. You've really lost interest for the end user. So I think it's defining the problem and involving the users in collaborating and co-creating solutions that really work.
Very interesting thought. And I can, after you explained it, I can understand it. And when we have the problem understood, we are much further. But getting to the core of the problem, what do we really want to solve, is a difficult question. Yeah,
it is, because we could talk about a problem right now, right? The two of us, and we would characterize it differently. And if we were going with your definition, we might have a set of solutions that would differ from the solutions I would create if you took my perspective. So it's really important that we agree on the problem, because that also will, in that conversation, will also agree with the outcome. Like, that's part of that really good problem statement.
Interesting. Thank you very much for this, Yvonne. Last question from my side. What podcasts do you listen to? What can you recommend to hear? How do you stay up to date?
Sure. So, of course, as a CTO, the other thing I could have said is, what's my biggest challenge is staying up to date with technology, especially AI, because it's changing every second. So my very favorite podcast is called Practical AI. One of the hosts is Dr. Daniel Whitenick. He's actually a friend and a professor, and owns a public company. So he is really, digging into AI and all of the things that you need to be thinking about. So if you listen to his podcast, you'll be caught up on what's happening.
Practical AI.
Yeah, and he also blogs, which is helpful, because he's having conversations with AI experts from across the globe. And he's sharing that insight and knowledge with you. Here are the things, the trends. Here are the problems we're trying to solve. That comes up a lot, because again, you have to know which tool to use based on your problem. And sometimes people take the tool and then they find a problem to solve with the tool. And I don't go that direction. I find a problem, then I find the solution of the tool. I really like the Huberman Lab. So the the Huberman Lab. Dr. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist. So I really like, you've heard me say the human factors piece. Of course, I'm an IEEE engineer, which is, basically our professional organization. So I'm involved with that. And I'm definitely reading a lot about engineering and technology. But I like the neuroscientist perspective because it helps me keep the human perspective. Like, how do we, like cognition, how does that work? How do we think? How do we interact with tools? I think that's really important as a builder to understand how humans interact with product. I also like deep questions with Cal Newport. So he has this new book. I'll show it to you. Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. So
that sounds good.
This would definitely lean into the European perspective, in terms of having work-life balance. And he talks about that. But it's really just an approach to how you work. He also has a book called Deep Work, which I really like. And it talks about having chunks of time in your day where you go really deeply into a subject and a topic and continue to build expertise. So I think, whatever job you have, you're going to go broad based on, all the things that you have to do. But reserving some of your time for that deep learning and that deep thinking is a game changer. So Cal Newport's all about that.
Yvonne, thank you very much for your insight. Thank you for your time, for your openness, and thank you for joining here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All the best. Thank you to our listeners for this English episode. Next time in German again. Thanks and bye-bye. Den Adlerblick Newsletter gibt es auf unserer Website adler-blick.de. Außerdem sind wir auf LinkedIn und Facebook vertreten. Wir freuen uns immer über Feedback.